Thank you so much, Matthias. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. No, thank you so much. And it's really an honor for me to be here today. And I hope I won't be boring. I hope I'll be interesting as possible, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible. But I'm really, really excited to be here. As Matthias mentioned, my name is Vicky Aridi, and I'm a lawyer by profession, and also a young person like many of you on this call. So I'm not 55 years yet. And I'm also the youth coordinator of Fair Trade Africa. And for me today, it's just to say congratulations to all of you. I mean, especially the young fair trade advocates here today. And before I begin this keynote, I'd like us to do something a bit interesting. So I heard someone was playing the guitar, Mathilde Kalisis. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. And I'd like to ask, would you be honored to play us a few tunes? And then if possible, if some of us could turn on our camera, and as Mathilde plays a few tunes, if we could just wave our hands like we were at a pop concert, just like this. I would have loved for us to dance, but given that we're sitting on our screens, if we could just wave our hands to celebrate this milestone that we're really acknowledging today. So I don't know if Mathilde, that would be possible. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you want, like, I can just turn on my microphone. It's not me, it's a friend of me, but yeah, if you want to listen to him, it's okay.
All right, that's great. And I don't know if you can all turn your camera and just do it like we're in a pop. I know we'd be dancing more, you know, but now we just have to adapt. So just a bit moving, you know, just to celebrate, but in a calm way. I mean, we can also be creative. I don't know what else to do with my hands, but I see Emilia has something so creative, so we could all follow her. Yeah, just to celebrate us, you know. If we were in person, we'd be dancing till the floor, but now we can just move our hands and our heads. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mathilde. We really appreciate. And sorry for putting you on the spot, but thank you so much.
No problem.
Today is about you. So we are here to celebrate you and to acknowledge your milestones. And yeah, everything we'll discuss is just how can we be advocates? How can we take the lessons that we've learned to the next level? And really, how can we have an engaging conversation? So this won't be your conventional keynote. I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but just how can we discuss together? How can we reflect? And after reflecting, how can we change it now to impactful action? In case I'm talking too fast, also let me know. So before we even go to advocacy or what we've been doing or how we've been working with different politicians and leaders, let's all pause for 1 or 2 seconds. Think about the world we're living in. I hope you thought about the world we're living in.
Now we cannot, sorry, Vicky, we cannot hear you properly, right? Or am I the only one? No.
Pops
sorry,
up at
there
the
is a
top of your
connection problem,
mind
Vicky.
when you think about the world we're living in. Well, let me change it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
We were thinking that in the world we're living in doesn't have a good internet connection. That's right.
Sorry about that. Our internet sometimes is a bit crazy, but sorry about that. So I was just saying, before we get into this keynote, it will be really one where we can have an engaging discussion, more of reflection as well, and see how our reflections can now turn into impactful action thereafter. So before we even go to the keynote, let's just pause for 1 or 2 seconds. Let's think about the world we're living in. What challenge pops up at the top of your mind when you think about the world we live in? You could put it in the chats, you could put it in your hearts. Feel free, whatever works best. The world that we live in as we know it faces so many challenges, as you know, as advocates, from the climate crisis that we are currently facing to about 860 million people across the globe, especially those along many of our supply chains, are living in extreme poverty. 860 million people globally about. Can you imagine that? Challenges of injustices of conventional trade and unsustainable consumerism. These are just 4 challenges I mentioned. I'm sure in the chats or in your hearts or what you've thought about are so much more. And these challenges are not strange to us, as especially young people. We face them every day, or we witness them with our own eyes. Many of you are advocates, and you hear these terms: sustainable development goals, decade of action. The year is 2022, meaning that we have 8 years to achieve the sustainable development goals, some of the things you're advocating for. 8 years, but we're so far off from achieving when we talk about zero hunger, when we talk about quality education, when we talk about no poverty, when we talk about life on land. We're so far from achieving that. Let's pause again. How many of you, I know majority of us are young, but do you think that we are valued, or do you, if you're not young or you're young at heart, do you think that you value young people as meaningful stakeholders in addressing these challenges? Do you? Well, if you're in this room today or listening in, I would like to believe that your answer is yes, because young people are critical stakeholders in addressing the different challenges that we face across the globe. When we look at the figures again, according to World Bank, and this is just a small demographic of young people between 15 to 24 years, they account for about 1.8 billion people. And that's just a small demographic. In continents like mine, Africa, we account for at least 60% of our continent's population. The figures don't lie. But when you look at those statistics and the reality on the ground, when we look at advocacy and addressing the challenges that we face, like climate crisis, poverty, injustices to conventional trade, 90% of the time, young people are either, 1, we're left behind. Number 2, as advocates, we're working 5 times harder, most of the time, to be recognized, validated, or given a space. Or where the doors open, we're seen as mere tokens to just tick the box, or for a good photo, to make the pictures look inclusive, or where it's a donor-funded project for advocacy to secure funding for the next donor funding round. And most of the time, most young people lack tools, skills, capacity to meaningfully advocate in different spaces. But when we're looking at this event today and what you've been able to achieve over the past few months, you are testaments that young people have not given up, that there are spaces and programs like this one being run by the Fair Trade Advocacy Office that are working together with young people to advocate for a system and for change that really recognizes young people for their potential as equal and integral stakeholders. So 3 things: recognizing your potential, that you are equal, and that you're integral stakeholders. So now you heard that I work for Fairtrade Africa. What does that mean? Have you heard about it? I don't know. Maybe to ask one or two of you, have you heard about Fairtrade Africa? Don't leave me hanging. Anybody? Yes, I see there are people who have heard about Fairtrade Africa, which is great. So we're not starting from scratch. But just to tell a bit about Fairtrade Africa, we are part of the international fair trade movement, as you know it. And we work with farmers and workers mainly, who we call producers. Currently, we have about 1.18 million fair trade certified producers across our 33 countries in the continent and Middle East. And really, what drives our work? What is at the heart of what we do with farmers and workers is working together to advocate, to strive for a world in which all farmers and workers can enjoy secure and sustainable livelihoods, fulfill their potential, and decide on their future. You know, when you look at especially many of the supply chains, as we said in the beginning, most farmers and workers are living below the poverty line. They don't have access to decent livelihoods. What can you imagine that? Yet they are the ones who produce the food that we eat. Yet they are the ones who experience the brunt of climate change the most. And when we look at this sector, especially along the value chain, you know that young people are not there as we would like them to be, because in Kenya and in Africa, for instance, the average age of farmers is 54 years, which always brings a question. In the next 10, 20 years to come, who will be there to produce the food that the world needs? So bearing that in mind, even at Fairtrade Africa, we're working with young producers and we are committed to work with them to advocate. So having them as advocates like yourself, to advocate for a change of this narrative, for meaningful inclusion, and so that we can really achieve sustainable food systems. And maybe just to play a short video that shows a bit of what our work does. Let me share my screen. Please let me know when you can see my screen. Okay, 1 minute. Okay. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Let me stop sharing because I didn't share with audio. Sorry. Okay. Just a short video.
Fairtrade Africa is proud to join the
Can
world
you
in
hear?
celebrating youth.
Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
There is resilience, passion, and innovations that continue to transform food systems across Africa. We believe that the next generation is critical in building sustainable farming systems and addressing the plight of food security. As an organization, Fairtrade Africa has worked with our producer organizations to co-design structures for youth engagement, co-organized learning and capacity building fora and exchanges with and for next generation farmers, designed programs for youth to be at the forefront of building climate resilience, ending child labor, and building sustainable agriculture value chains, collaborated with multi-stakeholders to elevate the youth voice to inform the shaping of the agriculture and trade sector. At Fairtrade, we have the Fairtrade Africa Continental Youth Association, which comprises African youth who are engaging in the agriculture value chain. This association is fundamental in guiding the engagement of youth producers across Africa. We also host the Fairtrade Africa Premium Alumni Association, which brings together youth who have benefited from education bursaries of the Fairtrade Premiums and are now leading monumental change in Africa. In our efforts to build sustainable farming systems in Africa, we are keen to engage youth with an interest and passion in agriculture.
Sorry about that.
to build their capacities, skills, and resources as next generation producers. Some of the projects we have undertaken for the youth include the Recover Africa Youth Competition, which received over 550 innovative ideas from youth across Africa on how they are building forward for agriculture and trade. In Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, we have the Youth Inclusive Community-Based Monitoring and Remediation Program that identifies child labor risks in the cocoa value chain and crafts remediation solutions. We are committed to bridging the generation gap in coffee farming. In Ethiopia, under our Dignity for All program, which is funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, we have been able to support the formation, registration, and training of youth coffee groups. In Kenya, through the East Africa Youth Project supported by Co-op UK, we supported young coffee farmers in Mutira Farmers Cooperative with training and facilitation to establish coffee nurseries and a clonal garden. In South Africa, we have worked to build the capacity of the youth as next generation producers. Across Africa, we have built the climate resilience of youth producers through training, support in adoption of green energy, and climate-smart approaches to agriculture. As we progress into the future, we are committed to promoting meaningful youth engagement.
Yeah, I'll stop there. So that was just a small video to really show and to advocate, since I'm in the room with many advocates, to really just give a snippet of what we are doing at Fair Trade Africa when it comes to young people. And looking within, we have fearless and bold youth who also advocate for a change to the status quo. And just to give you a highlight of some of these advocates, and when we think of advocates for us, sometimes we think of our Fair Trade Africa Climate Ambassador, Deborah Osei-Mensah, a cocoa producer from Ghana, who is always rallying young farmers like herself to advocate for climate action and to educate others on climate change adaptation. We think of Bismarck and Rachel Banda, two young producers who called on world leaders at the COP26 in Glasgow to be fair with the climate promise. We think of Reford, a youth advocate now working in KPMG, and Rebecca, breaking glass ceilings in finance and audit, who benefited from education bursaries of the fair trade premiums and are now advocating for fair trade globally. These are just but a few. Bringing it closer home, we have many great advocates across the globe. Greta Thunberg, many of you know, who has been at the forefront of climate strikes. When we think about Fridays of the Future, Daria Andronescu, who is the founder of the Wonder Wardrobe, which advocates for sustainable fashion. Hugh Jackman, who founded an organization and advocates for facilitating fair trade practices that benefit farmers in the global south through Laughing Man Coffee. We think about the great politicians you mentioned today, Nelson Mandela, the late Jawaharlal Nehru, so many great advocates across the globe. But today, we're recognizing each one of you here as leading advocates globally, because when we started, there are 12 local actions that were mentioned that you have done over this past program. So you're already leading this monumental change for ethical and sustainable consumption, for sustainable fashion, for climate change, and so much more. Your value as advocates is so integral, more so when we look at especially advocacy with your politicians in the global north. And maybe for us, where we sit, we need your support. We need to collaborate with you, because we can do so much more together. And even as you lobby with your different leaders and stakeholders, we need your support, especially when we think about advocating for climate justice, markets, sustainable consumption, human rights, environmental due diligence. And these are some of the ways we think that you can help us when it comes to advocacy. work and advocate and influence your governments and regulatory frameworks based on what you've learned in the program to enhance opportunities for smallholder producers and workers to access high value markets. We mentioned that a lot of our producers are living below the poverty line, generally across the supply chains. How can we ensure they have access to high value markets? Number two, when we look at young people, especially those who face, for instance, the brunt of climate change, like young farmers, they're excluded from decision-making tables. Advocate for meaningful inclusion of these young people at the decision-making tables. When we think about businesses, businesses play such an integral role across different chains. How can you advocate for the strengthening of business regulations so that they can be encouraged to invest in sustainable supply chains, pay fair prices for produce, and take ownership of environmental and human rights issues in the supply chain? We mentioned the climate crisis again. How can you push and advocate your governments to deliver on their climate change commitments? When we talk about net zero commitments, the climate finance promise. And you're also consumers. You buy products. How can you advocate within your social circles, within the spaces you are in, to invest and buy fair trade products as a step towards fairness, decent livelihoods, and ethical and sustainable consumption? We know many of you are into sustainable fashion as well. How can you advocate different clothing companies, brands, fashion lines to take that bold step to move towards sustainable fashion? And more so because they are young advocates also in the global South. How can we continue to exchange and collaborate together? And now, how do you navigate advocacy? Because you're on a journey to really great heights called the advocacy journey. And it's never as easy as it seems. Just like any journey, it has its highs and its lows. But just remember a few things. Remember your why and your what. Your why is why you decided to become an advocate. If we asked you today in an interview, why did you decide to go through the program? And why did you decide to become an advocate? What would you say? Your what is what you are advocating for. This too will always motivate you in the midst of any challenges you face. Then secondly, always remember, not everyone will think you deserve to be in the room or you deserve to be in that meeting with that politician. So when you get your space, own that space. And there will be criticisms that will be thrown your way. Take them positively, but sometimes with a pinch of salt when necessary. Then learn and develop from any space you get. Any room you're in, any interaction, pick something from it. And always get mentors to hold your hand. From my experience with advocacy, these are the things that have helped me. I remember I used to struggle walking from door to door to advocate for something, or really try to get my foot in the advocacy room. But when I realized that what is my why and what is my what, and just to learn and develop from any little space I get, that started to get me into more doors. And then use what you have at your disposal. Many of us are on social media. Social media is such a powerful tool. Use it to your advantage. Your voice is unique. Amplify it. Your networks can be disruptive tools to spark, ignite, and build your advocacy in a manner that's disruptive but meaningful. And then always know how to connect the dots. As an advocate, you should be able to connect what you're advocating for to the current realities and contexts. And lastly, just remember to be fair. F for fearless, A for articulate, I for intelligent, R for real. Be a champion for fair trade, for ethical consumption, for sustainable fashion, for climate justice. And of course, we have to do a bit of advertising and advocacy as well. Don't forget to buy a fair trade product to congratulate yourself on this milestone. That's it from me. Thank you for your time and congratulations once again.
Thank you, Vicky, so much for this very inspiring words from your side. Like, you know, when you started, no, I'm not. Super, thank you very much. It was very, very inspiring. I think without further ado, I would also like to hand the word over to our young fair trade advocates and also to our other partners here in the room. Like, it's a bit of a unique chance also to have a bit of a chat with Vicky today. And I think there were many issues raised, and I would like to give the floor to you. If you have any comments, questions, topics you want to raise about advocacy, about Fair Trade Africa, about Vicky's approaches. I think there are many things to discuss, and we don't have super much time, but we have a bit of time. So if you want to have the word, just unmute yourself, please, and feel free to, to comment something. Okay, well then I will use the chance. It's a bit your own. Yeah, Vicky, thank you for sharing the fair again. And while you remind us of that, can I ask you what was your biggest success as advocate? What would you say? What was your, what are you especially proud of?
All right, what I'm proud of as an advocate, I think, yes, Fair Trade Advocacy Office is based in Belgium, right? Right? If I'm correct.
We are based in Belgium and registered in the Netherlands, but based in Belgium, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. So maybe a success related to Belgium is was it 2018? Because of being able to advocate for young people, women, and climate change, I was able to have roundtable discussion. We were about 5 advocates with the Higher Excellency, the Queen of Belgium, and the Princess of Belgium. So Queen Mathilde and her daughter, Princess Elizabeth. And we were able to have a one-on-one discussion on and really advocate for issues to do with youth empowerment, women empowerment, and so on. So yes, that's still to date one of my big successes. And then second is now having been appointed to the UNICEF Global Sounding Board, because through that, I'm able to advocate and advise different governments, African Union, different institutions on really key issues that are affecting young people across the globe when it comes to employment, entrepreneurship, creation of skills, and also issues to do with social justice as well. Yeah. So I'd say those two. Yeah.
Because basically you are in touch with many very powerful people. You do things which many people don't do. We also had some of our participants here who were in touch with politicians and so on and so forth. Are you never scared?
Oh, I'm always nervous before any speech. Like before this, I was just like, oh my gosh, are my points ready? What if I'm going to be boring? Oh my gosh, what if I shrub or mispronounce something? Like there's so many irrational fears that come up. So it never gets easier, but as I start talking, it just fades off. I don't know if you noticed, but I hope not. Yes, but it happens all the time. You're never 100% confident. Yeah.
We did not notice, no, or at least I did not notice. I would have one more question, but still a chance, of course, also for you. Like, if you have questions to Vicky, then please interrupt me.
May I?
Yes, please, Ekta, go for it.
Yeah, so Vicky, I'm interested in knowing how did you start this fair trade advocacy and what were the challenges that you faced in the beginning of your journey? Today, you're very successful and quite influential, I believe. But in the beginning of your journey, what were the challenges that you faced and you would like to share with us?
All right. No, thank you so much. I think, so the question is on fair trade advocacy. So I actually got to know about fair trade when I started working for fair trade. So when I applied for the job at fair trade, that's how I started to know about fair trade and get to know more about what fair trade stands for, what it means, and why it's so important in the world that we live in today. And I've been in fair trade for about 1.5 years. So that's where my advocacy journey began. And I came at a time when in the system, there was also that move to really now, and that effort to really include young people in different activities, so especially in advocacy. So for me, it was a very opportune time, but still, of course, there are challenges faced in that, because it's something, especially within our different networks like Fair Trade Africa, that is still growing. There's that aspect of figuring out what are some of the key priorities, what structures should we put in place, how do we now build the networks. You know, when you look at fair trade, the label, the brand, it's very established in the global north. In the global south, not as many people know fair trade as we would like. So really, how do we start now advocating that and using and working with young people as advocates? And then from my personal journey, challenges, of course, how do you get your foot in the door? Because I remember there was a time I was trying to advocate with UN agencies. So I had gotten a long email list from the internet. So I wrote about 40 emails. So 10 of them went to out of office. Another 25 of them were ignored. So there were 5 left. 4 of them declined, and 1 of them referred me to her assistant. So no response on the advocacy matter that I was trying to push forward. And so, you know, there are those challenges. You keep knocking on the doors and maybe they're not opening, or maybe you get invited to a space. And as I said, maybe it's just to take a photo or to make a good impression. But these are challenges that happen. And slowly over time, when I learned some of the things that I've told you, understanding your why and your what, and really in whatever space you get, trying to stand out, that really is what started to open for me doors. Like if you're in a forum like this, how do you use your voice to stand out? You never know who's watching. You never just know which door might open just because you decided to speak up, or even to have a conversation with the person later on based also on your personality. Yeah, I think that's what I can say.
Thank you. We have a question or a comment from Bruce and also Carolina.
Thank you, Vicky, for that wonderful presentation, which certainly fills me full of hope. I wanted to say, you couldn't tell you were nervous, but after many years, I'm now 62, and I'm still terrified of public speaking. People always say to me they can't see I'm nervous, but I think maybe they're being kind. But I've learned that it can be a strength. Because when people see you, I remember years ago being asked to stand in front of a crowd at a theatre to make an appeal. It was for Nicaragua at that time. And I was trembling, absolutely trembling. So I said to the audience, I said, look, I'm trembling because I'm really scared of being here. And the only reason I'm putting myself through this is because I believe passionately in what I'm telling you. And that worked really well. So when people see that you're fearful or see that you're nervous or see that you're putting yourself through something, it can be a strength. And also it inspires some people who feel they can never take that stand, they can never do that, and think, well, if they can do it and they feel fearful, then maybe I can. But I wanted to ask you, Vicky, one question. You mentioned the why. And I'd like you to say to everybody in one sentence, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
I think I'm muted. Thank you, Bruce, for that. I think sometimes when I'm always asked the question, what is my why? I always say, why not? Why not take action? Why not? But really for me, what is my why is always my why I advocate is because I want to be at the forefront of creating impact, be it in women, youth, climate change issues, but really impacts that contribute to sustainable, meaningful, and inclusive development. That's my why. But usually I will always say, why not? Yeah.
Maybe before I hand over the word to you, Carolina, can I ask you, Bruce, because like, if I'm not wrong, you're one of the fathers of the fair trade town movement, right? What is your why?
So did you ask me then? Sorry.
Yeah, because like if you have already the opportunity to ask this, and I'd like to use.
Sorry, I was on another foot. My why, yes, happy to share with you. I get this asked all the time with journalists. They always say, why? And what's motivated me from the beginning is when I learned that we live in a world where a small child dies every 3 seconds from poverty, and this is preventable. And therefore, it's totally, in my view, unacceptable because it's preventable. It's man-made, it's preventable. And when a journalist asks me that, I usually say, well, that's my why. What I don't understand is why the whole world isn't doing this. Why are we all not up in arms because of this? Because it's the most injustice, and the greatest injustice in the world is the fact that children are dying from the lack of a sachet of salt.
Very good why, yeah, and very good reason to stay active. Carolina.
Yes, thank you very much. Then thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Vicky, for the empowering speech. Yeah, so I have a question. It was already related to the why before Bruce spoke. Anyway, just making a comment on that, I believe that sharing the whys maybe could feel everyone more empowered somehow. It's like, oh yeah, maybe your why could be also my why, and then we could have more whys in general, and like feel we're less alone in everything you were saying about. So also the fact of taking the floor and talking and saying something, maybe knowing someone has another why could be a different one, but anyways. So I'm here. It's regarding also your why, Vicky. With our group, we're in the food group. We're working on a podcast, and my personal why is to bring the voice of the people of the Global South to the European Parliament, because I believe that the bottom-up change is key in general for a systemic change, and that people affected by the problems should be able to have the floor. We can find solutions, but without knowing the problems, how do we find solutions? We can keep saying we're doing the best, but unless people are not heard, then we're not doing our best, in my opinion. Do you believe that a systemic change can happen, and how do you think it can happen somehow? Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much, Carolina, for that. And definitely I should ask you, what is really your why? I know you've touched a bit on it, but what drives you? And maybe when you also talk about systemic change, when you look at change, Sometimes we have the change that's just flips, and then we have change that is systemic and sustainable. So in order to have systemic change, as you rightly put it, the first thing is when we are even crafting solutions, we should embody something called human-centered design. And that's really where we are addressing those solutions with those who are affected by that problem, so that they are at the fore and at the center. And also for systemic change, when we're coming up with solutions, they should be sustainable. A lot of the times when we're coming up with the solutions, we come up with quick fixes, but we really don't think about how can we come up with those fixes that are sustainable. So to answer it briefly, I would put it in two ways. The people who you're addressing that challenge for, or who are affected by that challenge, should be front and center. So use a human-centered design approach when crafting those solutions. And two, let them be sustainable for there to be systemic change. And thirdly, also have the structures in place that will allow for systemic change. Yeah, I hope that answers.
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolina, for the questions, and also your summary was a very good summary of our program. Actually, like that's what we want to do. Like we want to give, we want to bring voices to the European Parliament and to the European political system that is often unheard. That's what we try to do. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, then I would say in that sense, thank you very much for your questions and your comments. Thank you, Vicky, very much for this really inspiring time.
From Mai?
Ah, yeah, sorry, Mai, go for it, please.
Sorry, I just 1 second too late, I think. So just two short questions, if we still have time for that. So again, thank you so much, Vicky. I think that was really inspiring, and for me personally, what I needed to hear today. So thank you again very much for the presentation. And so my questions, the first one regards, you talked about it, the importance of finding mentors. And I'm just curious, like in practice, how you have found good mentors. And the second one is about like the goals we're working towards are so big and far in the future, and it can feel kind of impossible to go there. So do you, for yourself, put up short-term goals, and how do you set those up, and how do you celebrate them? Or is that a way that you're like finding motivation to work towards these really long-term goals? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, May. Those are really good questions. So starting with the last question on how do you set goals and how do you celebrate them? So I think the best way sometimes about setting goals is setting short-term goals and also long-term goals, because your short-term goals will help you achieve your long-term goal. And also it allows flexibility for you to change your short-term goals in case there are issues or challenges or things that come up beyond your control that require you to realign your goal. So set up short-term goals that will help you achieve your long-term goals. And short-term goals could be as short as a month. Some people even do weeks. It depends on you. It's really up to you. And what I always say is celebrate yourself every day. Don't wait to have fully achieved the goal to celebrate. Even if it's that small step to achieving the goal, maybe you did an email, if it was something professional, or you managed to have set a meeting date with this politician, that's still an achievement. Celebrate it. Because if you get into the practice of celebrating every small achievement, even when challenges come, they won't throw you off balance. But if you're waiting for the big goal sometimes, and let's say along the way you face challenges, it may also just throw you off and you say, maybe going after this goal is not worth it. Moving on swiftly to the next. So celebrate yourself every step of the way. I know that's not easy. I know some of us are very critical of ourselves, but it's good. I mean, you're your biggest cheerleader. If no one on this earth will cheer you, you gotta cheer for yourself. Yeah, that's what I would say on that. And then the first question on mentors, how do you find good mentors? I think for me, I use online a lot. So I would always look also for instance, in the different spaces and conferences I am in, who are those names that keep coming up? Who are the people, after you've done a bit of background research, that maybe would be good mentors? Remember, you're just speculating at this point because you haven't interacted with this person on a one-on-one level. So after doing some research, also seeing who they are, reaching out, I always say the worst they could say is no or no response. So reaching out to them, just shooting your shots, giving it a try, just really explaining who you are, what you do, how, and always show that you align with what they do, you know, so that they take interest, and share a bit about some of your achievements. I mean, be your biggest amplifier. And then from there, take the conversation, maybe have a meeting and so on, and see if this is someone you'd want to be your mentor, and then take it from there. Also, even for instance, you've been in this group, and also there's been the Fair Trade Advocacy Office. Fair Trade Advocacy Office and even someone like Bruce on this call have very good networks. Reach out to them, say, I'm looking for someone within this and this who does this and this. Could you advise me? Could you maybe connect me to someone who you think could be a good mentor to me? And they would help. So use also what resources are available to find your mentors. And then also when you're in whichever space you are in, network, put yourself out there and see who is willing, because sometimes there are people who you'd like to be your mentor, but maybe they don't have the time to. Don't push too hard. Move. There's so many people in this world who would be willing to mentor you, to walk with you on your journey to advocacy, or really your journey to anything. Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. Very practical hints also. And to avoid what happened before, that I wanted to ask a question and I was too quick. Other questions or comments? See, I give you enough time. I give you enough time, right? Okay, well then, now, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your comments and for your talk.